Every drop of water is part of a journey. It begins as water vapor that falls to earth as rain. For the next 25 years, it's filtered through volcanic rock. At last, it arrives at its final destination. Really? Can somebody come fix this?
When it comes to water, don't waste a drop. You don't have to go to extremes to save water. For easy water-saving tips, visit boardofwatersupply.com.
Welcome. This is the combined community meeting for the East Honolulu Sustainable Communities Plan and Watershed Management Plan. I'm Melissa White with SSFM. I'm the lead consultant for the Board of Water Supply on the Watershed Management Plan and helping out facilitating the meeting this evening. I'd like to introduce our project team members that are here this evening. We have from the Board of Water Supply, Barry Usagawa, who will be one of our presenters tonight. We have several other Board of Water Supply representatives here also that you can identify by their name tags. From SSFM, we have Abby Seitz and Carlos Kelton helping at the sign-in table. And from Department of Planning and Permitting, we have Thomas Blair, who's the contact for the Sustainable Communities Plan, Noelle Cole and Dina Wong, all representing here. You can find us all by our name tags, and we're here to all throughout the night to answer questions. Also in the room with us, we have special guests from the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization in the back corner of the room. They're here collecting input for one of their projects, and so you get a 3-for-1 tonight. You get to provide input onto 3 planning efforts happening in this area. Good deal. So we are here tonight to talk about these 2 plans, the Sustainable Communities Plan and the Watershed Management Plan. You're going to hear plenty about them in the presentations, but we wanted to combine this meeting because of the nexus between planning, land use planning, and watershed issues. They're so intimately intertwined, and we're going to talk about how these 2 plans relate to one another and where they each are in their processes. But I think that, especially in East Honolulu, the connection between what happens on land and the quality of the water that we drink and in the ocean is very apparent. So I think it's relevant and important that we combine these discussions. So what we're here to do today, we have a pretty ambitious agenda. We have 2 hours till 8:30 this evening, and we're hoping to get through a lot of material. So with your help, we will do that. After this brief introduction, we'll have Thomas do the East Honolulu Sustainable Communities Plan presentation. We'll have some time for Q&A, and then we will have Barry do the East Honolulu Watershed Management Plan presentation, followed by another Q&A. So probably about 20 to 30 minutes Q&A time total. But then we have many other ways that you can provide your input tonight. We have comment cards as well as interactive boards around the room. And then there's going to be all these representatives here tonight that can discuss things with you as well. So in order to get all this done and to make sure we don't leave here without your input, we're asking that we all kindly observe some ground rules in terms of the presentation content. If you could hold your questions until the Q&A sessions are or until it's time for the Q&A sessions, that would be much appreciated. You can always write down your questions on a Post-it note if that helps. And then keep your questions focused on the material presented. Keep your comments brief so that everyone can get their questions in that wants to ask them. Show aloha and respect to your neighbors. Hopefully we don't have to remind people of that. But and please don't leave before sharing your input, whether it's by asking a question or by writing a comment on a comment card or talking to one of us. We'll make sure we get it captured no matter what, because that's what we're here to do, is to hear your input on these plans to make sure that they reflect your community. I'd also like to acknowledge a few people in the room tonight that are joining us. We have Trevor Ozawa and Tommy Waters, as well as many representatives from the 3 neighborhood boards in this area. Thank you so much for being here. And we may have other guests show up through the evening as well that we'll try to acknowledge as they come in. So with that, I'd like to introduce Thomas Blair to present on the DPP Sustainable Communities Plan for East Honolulu.
Thank you for coming in here about these 2 plans. My name is Thomas Blair. I'm a staff planner with the Department of Planning and Permitting. All right, so first off, I just want to talk a little bit about what I'm going to be covering tonight. I'm first going to go over the context for where the plan is and how it fits into Oahu's island-wide picture. Next, we'll go over the history of what has occurred since the publication of the last plan in 1999. That will bring us to today and the next steps and where we go from here. I'll go over some of the proposed changes to the plan, and I've broken down these changes into 4 main categories. There's more than that, but this is about what I have time for in my presentation. So if you have questions on anything else in the plan that you've seen, please talk to us afterwards and visit our boards on that side of the stage. So the general plan provides the overarching framework for the City and County of Honolulu. The general plan is comprised of comprehensive statements and objectives and policies. And this document provides the foundation for our planning processes. And currently that's at City Council up for revision. Under the general plan are the 2 development plans and 6 sustainable communities plans, of which is the East Honolulu Sustainable Communities Plan. The purpose of those plans are to conceptually describe the pattern of land use desired for the region. So that includes open space preservation, the community growth boundary, as well as some other policy statements that can be found throughout the plan. Secondly, the Sustainable Community Plans provide guidance for functional infrastructure planning. Functional plans are more specific plans under the Sustainable Communities Plans, one of which, Watershed Management Plan, which you'll hear for later. And there is a relationship between all of these plans and then also state plans, which is also here to talk about. And lastly, the SCPs identify areas within their respective regions that might benefit from more detailed planning. For East Honolulu, there are no special area plans or TOD, but we still do talk about specific neighborhoods when it occurs. And lastly, functional plans and the sustainable community plans, they all impact and encourage implementation through different regulations like the land use ordinance, which is also up for revision at this time. So this map is from the general plan. It shows Oahu's 8 regions. According to the general plan, East Honolulu is identified as a sustainable communities plan in an urban fringe area. That means the anticipated growth that Oahu is expecting will be directed to other areas, mostly primary urban center, Ewa, and central Oahu. To give you a better idea, that means that East Honolulu's current population, about 50,000, will remain that way over the planning horizon, which is to 2040. And the intent of the Sustainable Communities Plan is also to preserve and accentuate what makes this region unique from other areas. This is brief content of the plan. I'm not going to go over this. It's in the handouts in the back, and it shows kind of the different focuses of the plans. Getting into a little of the history, the current plan, which was adopted by ordinance, was adopted in 1999. In the adopting ordinance, it says that the plan should be reviewed every 5 years. So in 2005, we had a workshop. And at that time, we gathered comments, but it was determined that the plan was sufficient for that time, and that was fine. And then in 2012, after another 7 years had passed, we reviewed the plan again, gathered more comments from the community, and determined that also the existing plan was sufficiently meeting the needs. No further changes were proposed at that time. In 2016, we had a series of 3 workshops that looked into climate change, sea level rise, and green infrastructure. I was with the help of Kem Lowry and other groups from the University of Hawaii. And since then, we figured that there were significant changes proposed that merited the publication of the public review draft. Earlier this year, we published that plan to our website. Notices have gone out the last few days, and last week we presented to the Waialae Neighborhood Board, and this is the 4th workshop in our series of outreach. So where do we go from here? The public review draft is not a final product. It represents the initial findings and recommendations from the perspective of the Department of Planning and Permitting. It gives a chance for the public to weigh in on if we got our recommendations right. What did we miss? What needs to be strengthened, altered, or taken out? So tonight is a chance to become more familiar with this plan, and whatever feedback you have, we'll be happy to hear it. We'll also be going out to the other neighborhood boards in the next month to let them know of the plan and the proposed changes. And from now until June 28th, we will have an open public comment period. Those comments, after June 28th, will be published in what's called the review report. We will address everything that you submit to us, and we will say if and how the plan can address that comment in the review report. If it merits changes to the plan, then we will make those changes, and we will also let you know. After this publication, the plan will go to the Planning Commission, where it will be given another public hearing, and then to City Council, where there will be further public hearings. Here are some vision points from 2040. These are the points that were in the 1999 plan. We are not making significant changes to these points. We feel that they still encompass the vision of the community. And they do so by protecting the community resources of East Honolulu and adapting to the changing community needs. We are proposing changes to some of the vision by adding 4 new elements, so the previous ones will stay the same or change slightly. And I will go over these 4 categories in the following slides. The first of these categories is to make Honolulu an age-friendly city. Again, there's been other plans, and we are not trying to duplicate their efforts. We do want to recognize some of their efforts and some of the recommendations that they've proposed. For anyone who's heard about the Silver Tsunami, this table shows an idea of what that will look like in East Honolulu. From 1980, we had about 9.3% of our population, of East Honolulu's population was over the age of 65. It doubled in that 20 years to 9.2, and by 2040, we're projecting it's going to be around 37%. So knowing this, how do we plan for a population of 37% over the age of 65? What will the East Honolulu community look like in terms of land use, programs, facilities, and streets? One of the points that we've made is just to adopt some of the recommendations of the Age-Friendly Cities Action Plan. In addition to that, affordable housing is an island-wide issue, but especially for seniors on a limited budget. One element that influences living costs, like rent, is housing size. So the plan calls for greater diversity in housing sizes and more mixed uses. How this looks for East Honolulu is potentially allowing housing on the 2nd floor above some business areas. Accessory dwelling units has also been proposed to allow smaller ohana units where there's already housing. For East Honolulu, there's already a high lot coverage, so we're not anticipating many ADUs being built over this period. We're looking at maybe 50. And complete streets is another area of interest where we're trying to look at who uses the roads and how you make those facilities more equitable to all users, including seniors who may or may not have access to an automobile. So resilience to disasters and sea level rise were the focus of the 3 workshops held in the spring of 2016. Here are some of the recommendations that came out of those workshops. Many of these policy recommendations touch on other areas and have overlap, like low impact development standards, retention of stormwater, And some of these I'll go over later. Other outcomes of the workshops, like forming a community-based redevelopment district or identification of repetitive loss areas, are very brave topics to talk about, and it's going to require a lot of communities to discussion because it exceeds much of the scope of the Central Oahu Plan, but we do want to report back on those outcomes that we discussed in 2016. So this is the sea level rise map from the state report, and it's also found in the public review draft. This map, however, will be replaced in the final iteration of the map because this map only shows 5 feet, which the state adopted, but we've been told from the city level to be looking at 6 feet by 2100. So if this map disturbs you, imagine another foot. This is a good reminder that the plan is not final, so revisions will be made. We will be making these revisions based on your comment as well as comments from other public agencies. This map is still useful because it identifies threats to certain areas like Kulia'o, where we're looking at potentially severing a portion of Klana-Ana-Ole Highway while it gets to Waikiki. So this is something we need to be aware of as we're getting close to 2100. Typically, the plan horizons for sustainable communities plans are 20 years, so this plan goes out to 2040. There's an additional horizon added to be consistent with other plans that have been developed in the last few years, which is looking towards 2100. So 2100 is mostly just looking at the impacts of climate change and sea level rise, identifying that these are broad issues that need to be addressed now. And I want to encourage all of you to look at our boards in the to the side and the wording in our plans and the briefing materials. Because some of these issues need greater feedback from you, including potential alterations to our setback rules, looking at shoreline alterations, armoring, building codes, and relocation, all having to do with climate change and sea level rise. Another major concern that we've heard from the community over the last 15 years are issues that describe a healthy or unhealthy ahupua'a. There's a great concern for the health of Honolulu Bay, and the scope of our plan is limited. So this is why we're partnering with Board of Water Supply, because the Sustainable Communities Plan mostly looks at the area between the shoreline and the conservation areas, or what we call as the community growth boundary. So the Board of Water Supply is here to talk about water side of our plan and also the more Mauka areas. I like this graphic, which was used in our 2016 workshops, because it shows the impact that urban areas have on runoff and downstream areas. There are functional plans and regulations that already recognize the benefits of green infrastructure in capturing runoff. But because East Honolulu is mostly built out, these improvements are going to be done only gradually when redevelopment occurs. However, there are still infrastructure opportunities because the state and the city have miles of impervious roadways and highways that need to look into different surfaces or different methods of capturing and transferring runoff in those right-of-ways, in addition to redevelopment that can occur. And last week at the Hawaii Neighborhood Board, it was discussed how the city sometimes views trees only from a cost of maintenance standpoint. The plan tries to identify some of the benefits that trees and vegetation have in urban areas to combat these factors. There is also additional miscellaneous changes from housekeeping and comments we've received from community and government agencies throughout the years that do deserve further attention that we encourage you to look at the plan and review. And to reiterate, the public review draft is not the end, it's just a next step in an ongoing process. Comments are due on June 28th, and there's 4 months left to review. Check our website, which will be updated regularly for our schedule. We should have time for Q&A right now.
Thank you, Thomas. I just want to also acknowledge Director of DPP, Kathy Sokagawa, who is coming to the room also. Thank you for joining us. Correct, Thomas, we have some time for Q&A now pertaining to this presentation. Abby Seitz will be recording. If you notice anything that she's not capturing in full, let us know. Make sure you come up and we'll get your thoughts captured correctly. We have about 15-20 minutes right now to address questions on this presentation before we move into the Board of Water Supply. So with that, does anyone have a question they would like to ask of Thomas or the DPP team? Yes, Elizabeth.
Well, first, thank you for blending science with land use planning. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the extension and the timelines that you have there. My question has to do more with the housing. When you were talking about adding more bahanas, how are we going to manage that change for the use of the aging population when we're having issues with monster homes and illegal bed and breakfasts and transit vacation rentals, so that what the intention is held true with integrity?
Okay, yeah, the question was, how do we manage ADUs when we have monster homes and legal bed and breakfast? So our estimates show that we're only looking at adding an additional 50 units, which is not really significant over the project area. We do have lines in the plan calling for better regulation of transit vacation rentals. And that's, we have our department bill at City Council right now looking at that. ADUs, it's such a, we already have high lot coverages, and in areas of Waikiki you have restrictions in your deed already limiting you to that. So again, it's not a major issue, but it's potential for infill. So in table 2 of the handout that's in the plan, they're showing where some of that infill can be. Those are, and it shows the 50 units that are ADU, but that's not necessarily.
Yes, in the back there.
Hi, Thomas. Couple of issues, just really quick, on page 2.2-5 in the handout, the book handout. You're talking about, 3-3. You're talking about a proposed recreational area over by Makabu. What is the proposed recreational area they're talking about? Why is that highlighted?
Yeah, so again, this is a public review draft. We've already gotten comments on that map, and that map will be amended. It was a placeholder from a few years ago before the land was acquired. That color on that map will look more like the Kaiwi area, which is for preservation. We also will amend it to add a trail to that area per comments we've received. But yeah, there is no recreation proposed at it.
And then just really quickly, reading the bound book, the stuff that's highlighted, is that the stuff that's already been changed?
The highlighted is, it's not a policy change, so it's nothing that's proposed. Some of them are just updating figures or altering the language slightly.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I see 3 hands up, so we'll start with you, and then you, and then you. Okay.
Okay, I have 2. The wording you say limited development, you say maintenance is a predominantly residential area characterized by generally low-rise, low-density development. I'm a little concerned about predominantly and generally. Like, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean there are exceptions? And if so, what are they?
We're going to try to restate all the questions so everyone can hear, and plus because we're on video. So bear with us while we do that.
Yeah, so the question was over the use of language predominantly and generally when we're discussing low-rise residential character of the area. Again, the plan comes from the guidance that's provided by the general plan, which says East Honolulu is supposed to be an urban fringe area or suburban area with a population of 50,000. We're not anticipating high-rise development. We're looking at some of the growth is, we talked about residents over businesses, but that would be like 2-story structure. But that language is also reflecting what's there currently, not what's proposed. Yeah, because there are some, you already have some. So.
One other question, and that's on the disaster issue. I'm on the disaster planning committee, and what I don't notice is actually addressing any disasters. You're talking about sea level rise and flooding, but you're not talking about actual disasters. So I don't see anything like the extreme tsunami zones and things like that. I wonder if that's going to be incorporated.
Yeah, the question was how the plan does not address disasters, even though we do address something like sea level rise, so like the extreme tsunami zone. Yeah, the plan can be amended to talk about how sea level rise will impact the tsunami zones. We don't discuss wind, but we do have a table in the plan looking at the shelters that are available and which ones are being hardened. But you're right, yeah, we don't have any policy recommendations looking specifically at what can be done to strengthen that, so that could be worked on. We can work with your group with that too.
Yes, I'm wondering why you're saying that infrastructure will be slowly adopted, and if there's any consideration for stormwater fees and any incentive programs for a more fastly adoption of green infrastructure and stormwater issues.
So the question was on green infrastructure and how we can more quickly adopt this infrastructure. No, it's a good question. I know Board of Water Supply will come and answer that. Barry's already saying that he'll take that question later. As this is a policy document, we want to recognize there are other plans that more specifically go into those areas. But yeah, we can if that language is deemed necessary to the character of the plan of the community, then that should be included in this plan as well.
Did you have one more question?
One more question, kind of unrelated, but what allows East Honolulu to not allow for further development and population growth, where other areas will experience that? How is that being done?
Yes, the question was why does East Honolulu, or how can they limit their growth in population when other areas are allowed to? So what was previously referred to as the urban community boundary or urban growth boundary is now the community growth boundary. That's an island-wide adoption. It doesn't change the function of what that line is on the map. So everything within that line is in the state urban area and it's zoned. So the city has zoning on that area that allows you to develop on that. Outside of the community growth boundary, some areas are designated state urban, which we have a map on showing the inconsistencies that we feel should not be developed. And then there's state ag and state conservation. But all those lands outside the boundary are zoned either city zone lands, ag, or preservation. It's the reason for that is to make it more difficult for them to come in for a rezoning. So that so having that boundary there and having it sets up the zoning element. So when they come in for a rezone, it makes it more difficult.
To make who?
Landowners who own land outside of the community growth boundary area, who would seek to develop or rezone. Yeah, that's the general plan, which is the overarching document, is what provides guidance. And for East Honolulu, it says it would be roughly, East Honolulu will have roughly 5% of Oahu's population. And so that's the guiding document.
Were you the one who had your hand up before in the red sweater? Okay. Well, I'll go to you, and then behind you. Or, I'm sorry, was it you? Okay. Well, let's go to the lady in the red sweater, please.
Related to that is the 20% slope. So, permitting development on areas with higher than 20%. How does this document help that when some of those areas may be inside the boundary?
So the question was how that potential development relates to slope, looking at slopes of greater than 20%. So the 2040 plan is not proposing any changes to the community growth boundary, so it's not expanding it, it's also not contracting it. And that's because we do recognize that those lands that are inside the growth boundary that may have slopes greater than 20% do have entitlements if they choose, or if they can manage a way to develop. The plan does say that there shouldn't be development along steep slopes, but that's a recommendation. It's not codified by percentage.
Because in other parts of the plan, you're saying that areas that have been damaged before, we should look at not developing there again. It's the same thing with that steep slope. We already know that those areas, when you develop them, it's going to lead to the city having to buy homes that slide. So why wouldn't we put in place something more definitive so that the taxpayers aren't paying for that?
The question was, why don't we protect the areas that we know are vulnerable to protect the taxpayers essentially from having to pay for cleanup. The purpose of the plan is to provide policy recommendations which will guide the implementing ordinances. So the land use ordinance, it would be building codes can look at like what slopes are appropriate to be developed upon. That can be, we want the community to be able to use this plan to fight for your issues, your values, and we have a response from the Director of Planning and Permitting, Captain Silver.
I don't want to steal from Thomas's good presentation, but the plan is a policy guiding, it's not a regulation. So some of the things are still works in progress. Some of the things we do have requirements. Some of the actions of the director or the department are guided by this plan. For example, there was a Kahala cluster that was recently applied for. How many of you know about that cluster? Okay, do you know what our decision was? Our decision was partially denial and that we didn't allow any development on the steeper slopes. So it exactly follows this plan. It's part of the cluster application. So it is providing direction to us on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes we need more clout in terms of real regulations, but sometimes we just use the guidelines contained in the plan. But just to let you know, and that's a great comment about taxpayers' cost, but as you probably guessed, the project proponents have asked for an appeal of that decision and have asked for reconsideration. So that's going to take some more time from our staff to confirm our original decision. So again, but it works. The plan does work.
Yeah, I just wanted to premise thank you guys. I really appreciate the verbiage on adaptation. And it seems like it's kind of that proxy for that disaster planning that seems documents kind of developing. And also the increased age, population stability. It seems fair that to thank you for putting this plan forward. It does help improve like security, social security. So I looked it up, and at first my question was, what's the crime rate here at East Honolulu? With regards to your Chapter 4 plan to install the police substation in Fort Rupert, what's the purpose of this police station?
The question was what the crime rate is in this area and the potential proposal for...
I'm sorry, I missed out. It's actually pretty low. It's like lower than the national average, about 52% and 71% on the island. So the question is, what's the reason for the police substation?
Yeah, the question is, what's the reason for the police proposal for the police substation? That, I don't have the plan in front of me right now. That's not, I don't believe that's a new proposal for the plan, and I can double check on that.
Thank you.
I don't know if that was taken out of the plan. If it's crossed out, that means it's taken out.
It's not crossed out.
It's not.
This one here, it's on page 14, it's 155. A police station has been established near Fort Rupert 4-2.
Yeah, so, that is a correction. So that has been established, so that's not a proposed change. That was just taken out when the 1999 plan proposed it. Do we know, is that substation in near Fort Ruger? No? I can get back.
Okay, we've had somebody waiting to ask a question in the back. Yes, sir?
I see a problem with park management on the Waikiki coast. There's a piece of parkland over there between Sandy Beach and the state's Waikiki scenic shoreline. And it's on the city charts as a park. They had park signs up there recently. The park rules weren't being enforced. Vehicles are driving everywhere, driving on the beach, driving the dunes. So that was a big problem because it's turned into a wasteland where it's unfit to walk if you want to do the shoreline. But 10 days ago, the city posted no parking signs along there. And so I understand those are being enforced. The park signs were never enforced. So hooray, we have enforcement. But there's a lot of people that want access to that little piece of parkland. Fishermen, surfers, and hikers, walkers, nature lovers. And there was no provision for them to park. So we have a management problem. We've got a piece of parkland. We need to control the access so that it's not trash. And we need to allot some parking. There's a natural zone right at the wall for the Waikiki scenic shoreline. That's the only thing that doesn't have a no parking sign on right now. They took the sign down. They just took the sign down.
I was there yesterday. The signs are up.
I was there yesterday. The signs
We were
are up.
there yesterday. The signs are up.
I was gone 2 days ago. So as you enter off of into Sandy's on that end of that parkland, there's a huge bare spot where we could demarcate a parking zone very easily. Pilings, rocks, whatever. And then we would have controlled parking and controlled access. So I see this problem that, it just festers and persists for years and years and years. And now that we're looking at our grand plan, I think we ought to focus on that.
Thank you. I see one more hand up there. We'll get to you after. It's okay. We want to address this comment, and we'll go to you. And that'll be the last question for this comment period, but there will be another one that we can discuss further.
Yeah, so there is the issue of access to recreational areas that it's identified in the plan. Access to shoreline areas, access to trail or hiking areas. And the plan does recognize there is a balance between how much access is enough and how much is too much, that it creates congestion or diminishes the enjoyment of that area or the environmental carrying capacity of that area. So that is reflected in the plan. In terms of park management and our partnerships with our sister agencies, yes, we need to work on that and having them also enforce the plan of what is the access to those areas and what's sufficient, what's appropriate.
Okay, yes.
With respect to the verbiage on adaptation and the use and the need for this parking lot, what's the point of a parking lot when we're planning for sea level rise?
Fair question.
Question was, how do we build a parking lot there when we're looking at sea level rise if that area is going to be inundated? The plan is not intended to be parcel specific. It's not to identify potential specific areas of this is where a parking lot should be. The Department of Parks and Recreation should have a plan for those areas. The voter-approved initiative from a few years ago requiring departments to have functional plans should focus or should be where that's debated. But in terms of how this relates to where that infrastructure is when it relates to sea level rise, it's something that we need to look at as well when we're planning our infrastructure.
sorry, I know you wanted to end it, but the area that Reese is talking about is called Avava Malu, with a kahako over the first two A's. You gotta add it to the plan. You're talking about Mauna Loa Bay, Paiko Lagoon, Anama Bay, Kaiwi Coast. Add Avava Malu to the plan. You know, I got a lot of people here who are denied beach access. You're saying it's a general plan, but you're right here, and the goal is beach access. You gotta add this. This is a really, really important resource. So I'll follow up in writing with testimony, but
Please do.
please, yeah.
Thank you, and we'll make sure Abby gets it as well. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you all for your extremely thoughtful questions and for sticking on point. You guys have been great. Appreciate that.
You don't have to go to extremes to save water. For easy water-saving tips, visit boardofwatersupply.com.
Time to stick to the program and to turn it over to Barry Usagawa from the Board of Water Supply.
Good evening, folks. My name is Barry Usagawa. I head the Water Resources Division. I'm the Program Administrator and the Project Manager for these watershed management plans. Thank you for coming, and I just like to note this is one of, this is the 8th plan that we're doing. 8 of 8 plans, and this is the first time we actually had a joint meeting of the Sustainable Communities Plan and the Water Plan at the same time. We went parallel on other areas, but it's interesting that we can have a chance to actually talk land and water at the same time. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little background and the overview of the Oahu Water Management Plan. That's the overall framework, and then get into the watershed management plan. And then I'm going to turn it over to Abby, who will then talk about the watershed profile, and then present the water resources issues that have occurred, that we've heard so far, and then how to get involved. We've had a number of stakeholder meetings up to this point, and usually we get about 70 of these meetings on the water plan. Small groups, individuals, 2 neighborhood boards, and then we do these 3 community meetings. This is the first meeting of one of 3 as we start to build the plan with your input. So, in terms of the overview, there's a lot of plans and laws and regulations that feed into the plan. First of all, the State Water Code. This plan meets the Water Code's requirement for a county water use and development plan on the left, but realize that there's a number of other state plans that this becomes a part of. The State Water Projects plans for all state facilities, the Agricultural Water Use and Development Plan for agriculture in the state, the state's water quality plan, and the Resource Protection Plan, which is the how much water do we have and how we augment that and provide sustainable policies for water resources in the state. The plan needs to be in alignment with the 8 development plan and sustainable communities plans of the city. So it's in alignment with the state and the county plans. Then we have a legal framework. You can read it there, but the last one is the mayor's directive on climate change and sea level rise. And so a lot of the policy direction is going to be incorporated into this plan. On the bottom, you see all the 8 regions. They're the exact same districts as the land use plans. And East Honolulu is our last one. So 8 regional watershed management plans all fold into the overall Oahu water management plan that becomes part of the state plan. So this plan will be presented to, after we build it, we'll submit it to the City Council for adoption as an ordinance. And then it needs to go to the State Commission on Water Resource Management for adoption, for incorporation into the Hawaii Water Plan. So we've got a long way to go, and we're just kind of starting. We've completed 4 watershed management plans for the rural areas of Oahu. Waialae and Kolaloa was the first, and then Kolapoko, and then North Shore. We currently are working on EVA, Central Oahu, Primary Urban Center, and now East Honolulu. We are incorporating the Hawaiian concept of Ahupua'a in terms of water resource management. And it recognizes that this model sustained Hawaiians for centuries in pre-contact Hawaii. And as we started to discuss water resource management issues with our first regions in Waialae and Kolaloa, they said that you cannot just have a plan on water use and development. You have to also plan for the resource protection, the watersheds. And you should take a larger view of the Ahupua'a, which means mountains to reefs, and recognizing the fact that trying to ensure watershed health from the forest to the reefs. The plan is holistic, and what I mean by that is it's environmentally holistic, economically viable, and community-based. It recognizes that what happens Mauka affects Makai, what happens above ground affects what's underground, and that land use and water are interrelated. It provides a self-sufficient and sustainable community, so water to support those communities. And what's different about Ahupua'a is the concept is that it involves human behaviors and culture. Normally, you can put together a water plan that's primarily environmental and economic with some social, but in the Ahupua'a promotes stewardship and responsibility of land uses and recognizes its impact on groundwater, surface water, and inshore waters too. It is another thing to note is that this plan is not just policies. It is that, but it also is action-oriented, meaning that we're going to develop policies around the issues that we've heard, and then create some solutions to those issues in the plan, so that in terms of projects and strategies, and it will have 1 or 2 catalyst projects that are high priority that we should all focus our energies toward, because if you, as a catalyst project, if you focus and implement that project, it will bring connectivity with the other projects throughout the watershed. So there's a lot of benefits to this model. The other thing that is happening nationwide is this concept of One Water. One Water is a model that recognizes, again, the interconnectedness of all the water around the water cycle. So rainfall, runoff, percolation into the aquifers and streams, runoff into the nearshore waters, into the estuary areas. And it connects wastewater, water, stormwater, rainwater into one approach. And they also provide a collaborative approach where the board of water cannot solve everything by itself, not that good, but recognizing that a collaboration with wastewater entities, stormwater, to collectively we can do more than just if we did it individually. So there's a collaboration that once created could help implement some of these larger projects, because climate change and sea level rise is such a huge issue that we have to do it collectively. No one agency can do that. So our goal is, for the plan, is to formulate an environmentally holistic, community-based and economically viable watershed plan that will provide a balance between preservation and management of Oahu's watersheds with the sustainable water use and development to serve our customers, present and future. To do that, and those two goals are diametrically opposed sometimes, because if you're pumping water from the ground, you're not really preserving it, yeah? But there's ways to do that so that you minimize the impact to the resources. When we talk to the communities in Waialae and in Kolaloa, and when we took this watershed approach, everybody had all kinds of issues that came up. And we ended up slotting them into these 5 plan objectives. So the goal and the 5 plan objectives are common amongst all 8 regional plans, but promoting sustainable watersheds means something very different in Waialae than in East Honolulu. There are very little water sources in this area. I think the sources we have pumps maybe about 1 million gallons. East Honolulu uses about 9 million gallons per day of drinking water from the municipal system. So that means that it's imported some from Windward, but mostly it's from Honolulu. So there is a responsibility for the community in this area to conserve that water, because it's not coming from your watersheds. You're actually borrowing it from a neighboring community. And when we talked to those communities, they said, hey, can you make sure that those guys that are using our water are not just tossing it on the ground and throwing it away, that they're using it wisely, they're conserving it? Otherwise, we end up pumping, the other watersheds too much. And folks have done a great job conserving water too. The water use in this area has been trending downward, despite some minimal population growth. So our 5 objectives: promote sustainable watersheds, protect and enhance water quality and quantity, protect Native Hawaiian water rights and traditional and customary practices. And so there are a number of, and Abby will go into that, but there's a number of cultural sites in this area that we want to preserve and perhaps restore. And there's ways to help with that. Objective 4 is facilitating public participation. That's what we're doing today. And we'll continue throughout the planning process. Education around don't pollute, because if you throw stuff on the ground, it may end up in the stream or the nearshore waters in other areas where you're living over your drinking water. If you throw oil on the ground, for instance, not you, your grandkids may drink that one day. So you have to be cognizant of your kuleana and educated around water use practices and land use. And then again, project implementation, because we're trying to actually solve some of the problems. So it's not just policies, it's projects and programs and strategies. And then, of course, meeting future demands at reasonable costs. So the previous water plans were only 2 and 5, basically. When we went and got that feedback, we added the other 3, because then you get a more holistic type of approach. And you consider things that you normally wouldn't consider if you only looked at how do I meet demands. Where's the growth? Where's my water supply? And how do I get that water supply to the growth areas? It's simply not that simple. You have to take a holistic view in order to solve the larger issues that are around watersheds. And then I will turn it over to Abby. And I'll be available for questions.
Thank you, Barry, for setting that up. Now that we have general understanding of the Oahu Watershed Management Plan, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what we'll be studying for the East Honolulu Watershed Management Plan. Just to reiterate, we're looking at the same area that the East Honolulu Sustainable Communities Plan was addressing, which essentially is going from Kahala along the south shore to Hanauma Bay, and then along Kaiwi Coast to Makapu'u. Just to kind of go back and reiterate why we are doing this meeting together, is that although the Sustainable Communities Plan is addressing land use and we're primarily addressing water resource issues, there's a lot of overlap between water and land use planning. The Sustainable Communities Plan, as Thomas mentioned, is primarily providing guidance to the implementation agencies over the next, for the growth, to establish growth and manage it over the next 20 years, whereas the Watershed Management Plan will be looking at policies, projects, and strategies to ensure a healthy watershed from, again, what Barry had talked about from the Mauka-Makai approach, as well as ensuring sustainable water supply over the next 20 years. However, generally speaking, these plans also will be addressing similar policies to look at, again, water supply, how we can conserve water, how we can address stormwater runoff, and how we can also address climate change and sea level rise, as well as what was brought up before is looking at Mauka and Makai access issues. So just to give somewhat of an overview of where we're at in the process, Barry did somewhat of that, but we're at the very early stages of doing research of existing data and plans, as well as meeting with stakeholders like you to identify what are the critical water resource issues in this area. And from there, our next steps will actually be to do an analysis of how much water is projected to be used for supply and demand over the next 20 years. And from there, both using that information about what we gathered on the critical water resource issues, as well as what is projected in terms of water demand, we will from there start developing solutions to address these issues through developing the projects, the policies, projects, and strategies. And again, the policies are more overarching goals, whereas the projects will be existing initiatives that have momentum or champions in the community who can help bring those actions forward. And from there, we will develop the public review draft and then the final. And throughout this process, we'll be incorporating community input, and we'll be working with agencies and organizations to validate our research and the different issues that we'll be addressing. Again, so where we're at today, we're looking at the overall watershed profile and the critical water resource issues. In a few more months, towards the end of this, in the summer, we'll be having another community meeting to share with you guys what we have come up with the analysis on the water demand. And then from there, we'll be having a community meeting towards the end of the year to share with you more of the solutions of looking at the policy projects and strategies. And from there, we'll be working on the public review draft, which based on our current schedule, we'll be sharing with the community towards the end of 2020. And then the project will wrap up by the end of 2021. Now that we have a somewhat overview of the process, I'll be going into just a high-level bird's eye view of East Honolulu from the watershed perspective. Again, for East Honolulu, there's 10 watersheds comprising about 15,000 acres. The population is about 48,000, and as Thomas mentioned, is not expected to increase over the coming decades. Of the 15,000 acres, 40% of that land is designated by the state as urban land, and about 60% is conservation land, primarily in the Mauka areas, but also along the Kaiwi coast. Traditionally, this area was comprised of the Waikiki and Waimanalo Ahupua'a, and today there are 3 neighborhood boards within East Honolulu, which also lends its way to a strong presence of community organizations and very engaged citizens. In terms of how the State Commission on Water Resources defines water resources on Oahu, there's 5 larger, what they call aquifer sector areas on Oahu, and within that there are smaller system areas. And so East Honolulu actually falls all within the Honolulu sector area, and primarily all within the Waialae East Aquifer system area. However, the western portion, small sliver, also falls in with the Waialae West. And the State Commission is actually in the process of updating their water resources protection plan, which they identify the one aquifer within East Honolulu's sustainable yield as 2 million gallons per day. Again, there are 10 watersheds within East Honolulu, all very distinct. Primarily, these watersheds drain into Maunalua Bay. 8 of the 10 drain into this bay, whereas Hanauma Bay just has 1 watershed, and the Cocoa Crater watershed all drains into the Kaiwi coast. When we're looking at the water supply and demand, as Barry mentioned, almost all of the water from East Honolulu is brought in from outside sources, primarily from the Pearl Harbor Aquifer. It's over the averages over from 2013 to 2017 show about 8.5 million gallons per day, which is down from its 2010 data, which is good that it is decreasing. However, we do see that East Honolulu actually per capita uses more than the island average. The island average is about 155 gallons per person per day, whereas in East Honolulu, it's actually around 195 gallons per person a day, according to the Water Master Plan from BWS. So when we consider this in combination to future climate change impacts, this makes water conservation even more important in this district. Now that I've done kind of a whirlwind overview of the East Honolulu watershed, I'll be going into our preliminary water resource issues in East Honolulu. These issues were developed from ongoing data collection on socioeconomic data, land use, infrastructure, historical, cultural, trying to get kind of the whole profile of East Honolulu and different factors that are important to its watershed health. As well as we've met with different community organizations and important stakeholders to start verifying and digging deeper into what these resource issues are in East Honolulu. And so for each of these kind of larger topics, over the next few slides, I'll be describing an overview of what the issue is, why it's important to watershed health, and then going into some of the more specific concerns within the area. And just to reiterate, these are preliminary list of issues, and we're giving you an overview just so we can start getting your feedback on this and seeing what we should explore more. The first of which of these issues are being climate change. As we discussed about tonight, this is extremely important, particularly in Hawaii, and will have far-reaching impacts on its land, its people, and its infrastructure. When we're considering watershed health, we're specifically looking at the impacts that it'll have on rainfall, as well as drinking water supply, as well as its impacts on the increasing the intensity and frequency of storms. When we're looking at rainfall estimates, what makes this even harder is there's much uncertainty in what is projected towards the end of the century for rainfall. There are actually two kind of somewhat conflicting studies that have recently been published about rainfall projections at the end of the century. If you can see the top of the map here shows statistical downscaling, which indicates or which demonstrates that by the end of the century they predict substantial decreases in the amount of rainfall during both the wet and the dry season. They, particularly on the leeward side of the island, they show dramatic decreases. And within East Honolulu, we actually see both during the wet and the dry season, there could be variables of 10 to 30% decrease in rainfall. And then if we look towards the bottom map here, a different type of modeling that was done called dynamical downscaling, we see nearly opposite predictions, which demonstrate that there may be substantial increases in rainfall. And when we look at during both wet and dry seasons, and when we look at the East Honolulu specifically, we see that there could be somewhere between 10 to 30%. And so these are both valid studies that have recently come out, and they somewhat demonstrate how flexible we need to be in our planning and thinking about how to supply water into the future. But both of these scenarios show for very different outcomes, one being drought and the other being, extreme, could be extreme flooding or different issues with different scenarios. Very related to climate change is sea level rise. And although very correlated, we have it as a separate issue given its far-reaching impacts. We also are demonstrating this map shown from the sea level rise report from the state done in 2017, which shows most of the areas Mauka of the highway being chronically flooded under 3.2 feet of sea level rise. And again, as Thomas was saying, when we're considering planning for critical infrastructure, we're recommended to actually look at higher levels towards 6 feet of sea level rise, which we see in the pink, which would also impact inland areas, as you can see on the map, Kuli'o'o and other areas would be impacted by higher sea level rise predictions. In addition to thinking about the different critical infrastructure, pipes and different water infrastructure that may be impacted by this, we also need to consider how increasing sea level rise would also impact saltwater intrusion into coastal ecosystems, as well as groundwater. Moving on, one of the most visible critical water resource issues in this area is nearshore water quality. And when we're considering nearshore water quality, we have a great opportunity to apply this Mauka to Makai approach. Because as many of us, a few of us have mentioned, it's not just what's happening in the bay or in our nearshore waters that's impacting the quality of that, but it's also what's happening in Mauka areas. From our research, we've found that erosion from upland areas, as well as runoff, invasive species, and cesspools, all can contribute to diminish water quality in nearshore waters. Because of this, we see that Mauna Lua Bay today is actually diminished, and when pollutants come from Mauka areas, they not only impact human water or human safety, but they also come into the water and can smother fragile marine ecosystems and smother coral reef and lead to growing invasive species within the bay. Moving on now towards water conservation efforts. As we mentioned before, almost all of the water is brought in from outside sources for drinking water supply into East Honolulu. However, at the same time, East Honolulu uses more per capita than the island-wide averages. And so although there's many factors that contribute to per capita usage, such as climate, those factors, you can't necessarily control or do too much about. There are other factors such as land use that also contribute to higher per capita usage, which we can start having specific actions to address. Within East Honolulu, we see certain areas such as golf courses that use higher per capita usage, largely due to irrigation. Also, single-family homes, commercial development, and agriculture uses. Also, when comparatively looking at denser developments, use higher per capita, and that's largely, again, due to irrigation purposes. Moving on now towards flooding and drainage. I'm sure this is an issue that's on the top of many of your minds, and because the streams are channelized when they often become overwhelmed during extreme rain events. When we look at the FEMA's flood hazard maps, they've identified these areas in the pink and also in the green along the coast that are within their flood hazard zones. As we can see, these areas are mostly Makai of the Highway, as well as in Waialae Valley. But however, there's also some major data gaps here, as much of the district is identified as unidentified and does not have any hazard association. And as we've seen in the recent flooding in April 2018, can be persistent flooding during extreme rain events. And so when we look at both historical data as well as flood hazard zones, we're looking specifically at areas of concern along the coast, as well as Waialae Valley, Kuli'o'o, Kamilo'iki, and also the drainage issues that is caused by along the highway. Again, as Barry was mentioning, we, as part of this plan, will be addressing traditional and customary practices and how we can both protect and enhance access to those practices. As part of the public trust doctrine, we are mandated to look at what are the resources within this district and how can we make sure they are protected or even restored in the future. As many of you may know, traditionally during Ahupua'a land management days, Mauna Lua Bay provided fishing resources to the community and was abundant in marine life, as well as Kuapa Pond, which is once one of the largest fish ponds in all of the Hawaiian Islands. And so when we're looking at East Honolulu, there are opportunities for maintaining some of the traditional areas that were so important during this time, including Mauna Lua Bay. Kanebe Spring is also an area that is one of the few remaining fresh springs in East Honolulu, and was recently purchased by the Mauna Lua Heritage Fish Pond Center. and it was purchased for restoration purposes as well. And there are also more inland resources, such as the heiaus, that we're continuing to look at and identify and see how, what are the opportunities to work with community organizations, such as Malama Monolua, to ensure that what are left of these cultural resources in this area can be maintained. Along those lines, and what was actually brought up earlier, is access to Mauka and Makai areas. Through many of our discussions with stakeholders and community organizations, this has come up as a major community concern for a variety of reasons, but largely due to some of the environmental degradation that can occur when too many people are accessing these areas. But they also play an important role in watershed health. When we're considering the trails that are present in East Honolulu, we see that different erosion issues come up, as well as spreading of invasive species if the trails are not properly maintained or overused. On the flip side, when we're looking at access to Makai issues, or access to Makai areas, we see that there are, when we see that because of much of the development that has occurred Makai of the highway, that access to the shoreline is limited, particularly along the south shore from Kahala to Portlock. So considering both Mauka and Makai's and access to those areas are important for different reasons of watershed health. Lastly, we are looking at the issue of wildfires. Hawaii is actually one of the top states in the United States that has the highest density of wildfires. From the last decade, they found that on average, 20,000 acres burn per year, with many years actually more acres burning towards 40,000 acres. And we see this as being important because it can lead to erosion, it can lead to changes in water recharge, as well as just general changes to the soil chemistry, which are important to the watershed health. Recently, they did a study, DLNR supported a study that examined the density of wildfires in East Honolulu, and even though the entire district is identified as a medium risk area, we have seen that that areas along the Kaiwi Coast, upland forests, as well as Kamilanui, as we saw as in 2018, have more vulnerable to wildfires. So now that I've done somewhat of a general overview of our 8 preliminary critical water resource issues, I'm just going to leave you with a few kind of actions of how to stay connected to this project and get involved. So again, we will be meeting with stakeholders throughout this process, consulting with neighborhood boards as well as elected officials, and throughout this process we'll be having 4 community meetings. So far we've been meeting with, have met with Maunalua, Watershed Hui, Livable Hawaii Kai, UHC grant, and different community organizations. We've also been meeting with different partner agencies, as we know that we'll be having to work closely to make sure that the projects that are recommended in this plan are being done so in collaboration with other agencies. Thus far, we've met with the Office of Climate Change, Sustainable and Resiliency, as well as different offices within DLNR. And we're also ongoing reaching out to the neighborhood boards and elected officials, as I mentioned. Again, we're in the first community meeting, and there will be 3 more following this. If you do have any comments or questions after this meeting, There's contact both from Barry as well as Melissa, who's the project manager, and we'll have this information up after we break into the open house. And from there, I will hand it over to Melissa to take any questions.
Thanks, Abby. That was a lot of information to digest, so thank you all for being so patient. And at this time, we are a tiny bit behind schedule, so we'll probably spend about 10 to 15 minutes doing open Q&A, and then hopefully the rest of the time we can spend talking with you and getting your input at the different stations around the room. So if that's okay with you all, we'll start with the Q&A. Yes, Bob.
I had the benefit of a preview session, which Barry said that these slides would be up on your website. Is that?
Yes, so this presentation will be posted on there's a project website for this project, and it's actually on the fact sheet that's available at the front. So if you visit that website, we'll get that posted shortly after this meeting. Give us a couple days. I think that should be enough time for us to get it up. And also the contact information for me and Barry is also on the fact sheet. Anyone else have a question at this point? Yes.
I was just wondering, like, in regards to the objective to protect Native Hawaiian rights and traditional customary practices, it's not really a question, but more of like a observation. But I saw that Keapava wetland was missing, and it is a fresh water. It comes from fresh water, and to add more, there's also 2 halos that I thought should be included.
Thank you. The name of that again? What was the name? Keapava wetland. Okay. Thank you very much. We do rely on your local knowledge to make sure that we are including all the important sites. Some of them we don't actually map because of their sensitivity, but we want to make sure we know about them. So please make sure we get that correctly and write it down if you don't see it. Thank you.
Yeah, I know Barry talked about the Aquifer management framework, and Abby gave a presentation on how stakeholders are all being considered and collaborated. But I didn't hear of actually any planning. So there's, I'm a little bit concerned as if there's nothing to really comment on. And my one note to that comment about is that if this area is going to experience less population growth, then it would have more opportunities to actually implement A'apua'a indigenous frameworks, which include farming and loci systems, which actually help estuary and freshwater health, sediment retention. So I'm wondering if we're looking, in our future, and more areas of Honolulu are going to have more people, and this area is going to have less people, if we considered actually Hawaiian native practices and having our keystone hollow to support watershed health, because it is showing to have tremendous impacts on watershed health, sedimentation retention, landslides, and also animal and plant ecosystem.
So let me try to rephrase. The main point the second point that you made was to make sure that the opportunities for Ahupua'a-based management and preserving watershed health are at the forefront of this plan. Is that, you want to make sure that there's plenty of opportunities within this district? Is that the comment, basically?
Yes, particularly agriculture.
Okay, particularly for agriculture. Okay. Well, you're right. There's not a lot of growth anticipated for this district, but that doesn't foreclose the opportunities. Both of these planning processes are intended to identify policies, and this one in particular includes projects as well. So there's some possibilities for opening doors to implementing these kinds of projects. And as Barry mentioned, we're looking at it's not a static area, because it needs to be proactive in both water conservation as well as watershed management. And so the projects that are going to be included and supported in this plan are going to be proactive in both of those areas. And as Barry can talk to, there's actually some support within the Board of Water Supply and other departments, and we're hoping that this plan can help projects like this actually get some funding to move forward. Is there anything you want to add to that, Barry?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, you mentioned Lieu, Kalo. It usually happens around flowing streams. We have 3 restoration sites on the island, but they're in different districts, where we're trying to restore Lieu, Makaha, Waialae, and Manoa. If you go to the OEQC website and look up Makaha Lieu Restoration, that's one of our projects where we have 13 acres of kalo that we've leased to a community group to start farming kalo. They've opened 2 lois so far. But we're working on the environmental assessments for Waialae and Manoa. We're trying to retitle the Manoa Lieu Restoration Site, but it's in the back. So it's in those areas where we're trying to restore where we can. Ancient Lieu. I don't know if there was, maybe there was dryland taro growing here, but mostly I think, from what my observation is, primarily fish ponds. But we do try to identify those restoration opportunities, and it was on border water land, so we were able to fund part of that. So just so you know.
Right, yeah, and on the farming, we've also been consulting with some of the farmers in the back of the valley here, thanks to Elizabeth for helping to facilitate that meeting. So thank you for that comment. Is there another question? Yes.
You talk about water projections for the next few decades, but I was just wondering if there's any look at capacity. I mean, this has been a concern that's been brought up often, especially as we look at the number of tourists who are on the island. And then along with that, I think is reusing our water and gray water in particular, and how does that fit in the water cycle and what you're planning?
So this is where our coordination with the Commission on Water Resource Management is really critical, because they're the ones who study and set the sustainable yields for the aquifers, basically the capacity of our water supply to support us into the future. So we're going to be working really closely with them, and they also strongly emphasize opportunities for water reuse and conservation. So they're going to be looking to make sure that each of these watershed plans incorporate robust opportunities for that. And in East Honolulu in particular, I know we're looking at projects that might encourage water reuse, capture. Because this district doesn't draw a lot of its own groundwater, it relies on water from other areas, particularly the Pearl Harbor Aquifer. We actually kind of need to have a broader view of the water sources that are feeding this area, not only looking at the water supply in this area, but throughout the island, because it will sustain this area into the future as well. Anything you want to add, Barry?
I always want to add stuff. By the way, send your comments to Melissa. She'll respond. I've been looking at recycled water for Hawaii Kai Golf Course, because we use drinking water to irrigate that course. It was one of those agreements way back when it was developed. So the Hawaii Kai wastewater treatment plant is operated by American Water. They used to irrigate the course with some treated reuse water back in the day, in the 80s, I think, and they stopped that. My discussions with Lee Mansfield out there, the wastewater is salty and would have to be desalinated in order to be reused. Otherwise, you'd kill the grass. With sea level rise, we expect the salinity in the wastewater treatment collection, the wastewater collection system to get worse. And so it would be difficult to recycle there. But we did do some engineering around that. Gray water is a great, I think has a great opportunity, as well as stormwater capture, rain barrels. We have our conservation program is expanding into rebates for rain barrels. You can get them at Home Depot or get them online for a $40 rebate. We have a $75 rebate for clothes washers, and we're expanding to weather-based irrigation controllers. Because especially in this area, large properties, swimming pools and landscaping, if we can try to build some efficiencies in there, provide some incentives for residential users to take advantage of, I think that's will be written into the plan. Gray water is certainly an opportunity as well. Water from your enclosed washer can be used to irrigate your landscaping. So opportunities are there. So thank you for that.
Okay, I see three questions. Okay, we'll start with you in the blue shirt, then to you, and then to Mr. Ozawa. Yes.
I just had a question about the reference to capital improvement budget and implementation. Is there like some economic development component to the management plan, like prosperity?
Oh, good question. The question is there an economic development component to the plan? If you recall, I'm probably not going to get the exact wording correct, but economically viable is one of the objectives of the plan. So we are going to be doing reality checks, recommending things that are realistic in scale and investment for this district. But I think that also looking at potential benefits of the projects that are included in this plan and evaluating them against that kind of benefit. That's a great suggestion, and we'll take note of that. Yes.
The title of the paper is Watershed Management Plan. It strikes me that begs the bigger problem of the source of water for East Honolulu. That's been admitted to be the Pearl Harbor Aquifer, which is sitting under millions of gallons of jet fuel in 90-year-old corroding steel tanks. So is Board of Water Supply working on that source for us?
I think that's a good question for Barry to address. All right.
I knew radio was going to come up. We've been actively involved in the agreement on consent. That's between the Navy Logistic Agency and the EPA and the State Department of Health. So we've been offering information on and our concern about all of that, those few tanks 100 feet over the drinking water aquifer. On our website, we have all of the information that we've been able to research. We made presentations to the legislature and to council and to the elected officials and to the community as well. Our position there is that we believe a double wall tank provides the most effective means to store fuel and measure and monitor its containment. Right now, it's just a 1/4 inch steel that's, when they find a leak, they just weld on another plate. So we've been actively doing that since 2014 when they had the 27,000 gallon leak. The Navy has a Red Hill shaft that's right makai of the fuel tank, so they have a lot of skin in the game because it would contaminate their own source. Now it's separate. It serves the Pearl Harbor and Hickam Air Force Base. If there was a large failure of the tanks, it could spread to some of our sources. The Halava shaft, which is one of the largest sources we have in this Honolulu district, and a Honolulu well. So we continue to participate and engage the Navy and the Department of Health and EPA on this issue. It's ongoing. So we'd be happy to provide a more detailed presentation on that should you wish. But yeah, it is a concern. Contamination is just like loss of rainfall, and we lose the ability to utilize the fresh water that's contaminated. So thank you for that.
All right, we had a question from Trevor Roseland. What's your question?
Thank you. I just wanted to know what specific changes you would be seeking with regard to stormwater management, and specifically like in the Honolulu, Lieu Valley, Aina areas. Because I didn't see anything that's really standing out as far as any changes to that. And with the Army Corps of Engineers really having a bunch of different projects that have been either started and put on hold or pending for decades, really. I think it would be nice if we had some guidance in at least Honolulu sustainable community plan, especially if people are going to be investing so much money. The second point is that if you can look at the Olelo Hawaii in the plans, there's just so many errors in the names of the placings in this area. Honolulu, Kamila, there are others, but I won't go on to it, but it should be correct.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Stormwater management, certainly I was going to mention the Army Corps' projects, and we'd have to check with them on the status of that. I know they had funding for the Waialae flood mitigation project. I'm not sure what the status is in the Waialae, Haione, and Haina area, but we'll research that as we write the plan. And then we better get the Hawaiian names right. So, thank you.
All right, I'm going to take two more questions, starting with you. Yes.
Barry, what's the status of the new tank that's supposed to be built in Waikiki near the old Waialae school? And there's a well up, like a little further up from there. Is that operational?
Yeah, so you're referring to Aina Haina. We have a well that's in the very back. The uppermost reservoirs, it's called the 395 reservoirs, I believe, and it serves the Aina Haina area. It's a small well, a couple 100,000 gallons per day. That's still operational. That one area is short on storage, so we're planning to put a second reservoir next to the existing one right next to the old Wailupe Elementary School that's been turned over to the city. So that is, I think we're going for funding this year, I think, for that project. So.
Somebody want to throw a final one out there before we break out? Okay, yes.
Traditional and customary practices is one of the topic areas. Will you be analyzing how those practices and the resource areas where they're practiced be impacted by sea level rise and the approach that we have to be followed, protection, adaptation, or retreat?
So both of these plans, I think, are at the policy level. They can identify these sensitive resources, and I think an analysis of those is probably beyond the scope of the watershed plan. However, in the recommendations in this plan, it can identify the need for that. And it can also look at which of these sensitive sites that we know of are within the inundation area. So we can set priorities and recommendations for this plan, and we definitely encourage any input you have on that. Okay, you guys have been really very insightful and thoughtful audience. I really appreciate everyone staying this long, and we would really love to hear from you before you leave tonight. Now that you've heard a little bit more about these 8 water resource issues, if you want to vote on your top 3, if you haven't already, there's some dots at the back table Carlos can give you. If you think we're missing anything or you want to make sure something's captured, feel free to leave a Post-it note on the board. And then also there's comment cards at the front if you want to give us a lengthier written comment on either of the plans presented tonight. And don't forget to visit OMPO's table as well. They need your input. So thank you all so much, and have a great evening.
Every drop of water is part of a journey. It begins as water vapor that falls to earth as rain. For the next 25 years, it's filtered through volcanic rock. At last, it arrives at its final destination. Really? Can somebody come fix this?
When it comes to water, don't waste a drop.